Hi guys, Hengist here from House Hengist Comics, and a big welcome back to the channel, Beansters. It looks as though the French are in serious trouble, guys. Today we are in BLITZSTEEL, episode 37 of Blitzkrieg, the Battle of Hannut, part 4 finale. First, the news segment, and we're going to go back to our operational map. Note Thysnes, Hannut and Crayen in this pocket. Here are the initial skirmishing actions at number 15 really, and 14, as you can see there. Thysnes will be next, and we're going to see the Summa counterattack here from Crayen today with a large number of Summas. But first, let's take a look at the Panzers. We've got the Befehlswagen armed with a machine gun. We've got the twin machine gun mounted Panzer 1, the Panzer 2 with a machine gun and 20mm cannon, the Panzer 3 with 3 machine guns and a 37mm, and the Panzer 4 with the short 75 and 2 machine guns. But don't forget that 20% of the force are Panzer 3s and 4s, that's all, and they're taking on the Hotchkiss tank, heavily armoured, with a 37mm gun with both the short and the long variant, and the dreaded Summa with the 45mm gun as well, or 47mm I believe. These have the potential to be the grave of many tank crews. Hannut has orders and he has to keep pushing forward. The French, basically, they're doing the best they can to hold this position. They think they've encountered the majority of the German armour, and their Summas are about to launch a devastating attack, as we can see from Crayen. But look at the turret, and this is really important because the French armour is to suffer from this one-man turret, which is going to cause major problems. Here in this next slide you can see where the commander sits. He's got the gun to deal with, to navigate the tank, fire it. He's got so many problems. So let's get into the vital statistics really today, and these are the stats that we're working on. We appreciate any advice you guys have. What we're trying to do is obviously reflect the historical wargaming aspect to this, based on the history as well. So do freeze these slides, take a quick look. In the first slide where we're talking about penetration, that's the anti-tank value. And in the second slide, when we're looking at rear shots where it's slashed, that is if you get a close-up range from the rear. So without further ado, having consulted that, let's get into the battle action, guys, because today it's a great one, and it starts with a French smoke bombardment, and this has a huge advantage not only to the French to conceal them from the gun line of attacking panzers, but also for the Germans to mask their attack as they bring down artillery on that infantry in the center. The regimental commander, he's under a lot of stress, but he knows he's got armor coming to the rescue from Crayen. His anti-tank gun line is stuck there with no fuel, but it's holding that flank as light tanks are approaching towards Crayen. Now these anti-tank guns have got ammunition, which is really important, but they are also supported by the Panhards who've been refitted, and there's one lone T-15 tankette. But beyond that, we've got 2 infantry platoons in Crayen, so it's a pretty steady line. On the right flank of the French line, we've got the 475s. We've also got some 20mm anti-air and some tanks, but the artillery is continuing to pound this central position, and at points the French believe they're going to make an assault in the center. Meanwhile, at Hannut, we've got a battle which is going on, and the French and Belgians are holding on in this street fighting. This is dice rolled off table. The pioneers are moved basically to get behind Hannut and cut off and thereby compel a surrender. But the French line maintains its strength and continues to basically hold. Here you can see the 20mm behind the infantry. When we get an air attack, the last of the Luftwaffe, directed by the forward air controller, and once again the Stukas are diving out of the sun and basically range in and hit and destroy another Hotchkiss tank, limping back towards Crayen. We also see French artillery pounding the approaching German vehicles as they move forward, but the smoke is still there, covering those Panzer 2s and Panzer 1s. But ultimately, I think the 75mm are holding their fire other than for bombardment, and they get hit by 150mm guns which have come online, taking 2 guns out in one devastating round. Another H-35 and the rest of the platoon break as the Panzer 35s burst through and are heading towards this avenue and looking to break off the table. The French infantry look very, very nervous as we see more action taking place as the Gebser practically bring a building down inside Hannut itself, but they're hanging on, those allies, as the Panzer Grenadiers debus and basically have now got them surrounded. What we can now see is obviously the position as the Panzer Grenadiers move into the back of Hannut. But on the right flank, Panzer IVs have arrived with the Panzer III command tank, who lifts his binoculars and goes, "Oh my God, more French tanks." And this time it's a French counterattack with the Sumas. There are 12 and they come rapidly on at cavalry pace, moving forwards basically to drive in the imperious Germans. Here we can see the gun line. But the Panzers IVs open fire as well, as indirect artillery is landing all over the place. It's not affected by the French at all, unfortunately. And those Panzer IVs fire and basically knock out 2 guns on that gun line, making it really brittle straight away. But they've got the Sumas. And we start to see a battle on the German right flank between the light tanks and they've got the Panzer IVs anchoring there. Now, they're going to try and hold up those Sumas as they attack. Here you can see that defensive pocket around the village with the tanks. But artillery is now ranged in on the Panzer Grenadiers, temporarily pinning them down. And we've got anti-tank guns coming up to support the right flank of the left attack by the Germans when they bring in 105 artillery and start ranging in on the tanks as their panzers move racing towards this avenue line. They've knocked out some more, as I said, H-35 tanks, and they're about to break onto this infantry who have basically only got 3 tanks behind them. The Sumas have broken up their attack and are moving across as a Panzer III gets hit badly by a long-range shot from a long-barreled H-35, taking it out. It bursts into flames, in fact. We've got also problems now because both batteries are pounding the Sumas as they try and get to that flank. Meanwhile, on the right flank, the Panzers are engaging the Hotchkiss tanks, avoiding the Sumas, and basically just waiting and trying to keep that, getting ready to go. The Panzer IIIs now drive into the French line and they basically crush the first foxholes, one of them getting pinned down, bogged down I should say. The infantry obviously fall back, unable to counterattack as the mechanics are desperately trying to fix stuff. But the French do manage to recover an H-35, they fix her turret and she's basically back into action. As we get the Panods now joining the last of the Hotchkiss tanks on that road, the Sumas gallop towards the Panzer IVs. And we've got all sorts of action going on as the Panzers are basically looking at the Sumas that have split up. And a little Panzer II opens fire on the flank, causing damage to a Suma, which is rather impertinent. And the Sumas are now moving basically towards the town to try and relieve that, but they drive off only the Panzer Grenadiers. Perhaps they sort of switch their attack as the Panzer Grenadier pioneers move into Hannut itself. We've also got 105 and 155 artillery. This starts to damage the tanks as those 3 Sumas race towards the Panzer IVs. But the Panzer IVs are hit, one is damaged, one is knocked out. Again, the Germans are very, very nervous at this point, not sure if they can stop this charge by the French cavalry, the cuirassiers, as they move forward. Their artillery is trying to blow up the Sumas in the central position and stop them getting to their lunge onto the right flank. Here you can see the Panzers engaging the Hotchkiss tanks. The motorised infantry have dug in again, well done to them. But you can see the number of light tanks which are all switching round onto this flank, pushing to get off the table, led by their Volkswagens. They're moving forward and the Panzer IIIs basically start opening fire. But they're not that effective. They start to cause damage, knocking a turret out on one Hotchkiss and basically immobilising another with damage fire, taking 3 pins. Here you can see the artillery again from the French, their second battery trying to stop the Kratschützen and moving forward. They pound it, but again, they can't seem to do any damage. And then we see basically the return fire. They remount that Panzer IV crew, destroy 1 tank, cause damage to the second, and basically halt the Suma attack. The Kratschützen keep going. They unpin and move forward quickly. As we can see from the central position, the key here are these Sumas, which could have engaged the armour on the left, are now moving to the other flank, with just 2 Panzer IIs basically stopping them. Here we can see the Panzer III open fire and blow the living hell in an excellent turn, knock out all 3 Hotchkiss tanks, which leaves that flank open as Hannut's charge the right flank and basically engage the Panzer IIs and 1s, knocking several out and forcing company platoon morale, but they don't break. There are the Sumas charging across to their right flank, and we see the main thrust on the French left against the German right knocked out ignominiously by Panzer IVs, and in fact it was the Panzer III command tank which did devastating damage. Here now we start to see the Germans who are pressing and basically exiting the table, so to speak, and breaking through as artillery now pounds the junction where the Sumas are gathering with the artillery, trying to cross and stop the German penetration. Effectively, a Suma is repaired by a mechanic as well, and that's back into the action. But you can see the light panzers moving forward. Panzer I's effectively breaking forward first. The 2 Panzer IIs, the Ds in the middle, basically join that and effectively knock out a Hoch 35. But in return fire, a Suma knocks out a Panzer III. That's 2 knocked out, and the 75s are also pounding this position and have to move out of their entrenchments to try and get across to the flank as more artillery explodes all over the place. They get caught in the open, but miraculously don't get destroyed by the 105 and 150 millimeter artillery. Over on the French left, the tank battle intensifies, but ultimately the Panhards are driven off and break and flee back to the line, leaving only a T-15 which has been repaired and effectively a Hotchkiss on that flank against several heavier tanks. There's only 1 anti-tank gun as well, but there are infantry in Cayenne, and that could hold them up. And it's dusk, guys. We've had 24 turns of intense battle action, and ultimately the Germans have penetrated the line with their light tanks. It's a German victory, a 3-star rating, an excellent performance. So what can we say in postscript? Well, merde is basically what the French can say. But when you look at the battle action here and all the maps, the French are all over the place trying to respond to constant German inertia. They've got a plan and they've stuck with it, and they're driving using a lot of tactics and mobility, which were key. The French suffered from that one-man turret, suffered from basically their mobility, and we were keeping track of everything quite attentively. But if you look at the losses as well, it's quite staggering. So do freeze this. The number of H-35s, they lost 5 Sumas. 3 heavy German tanks were knocked out, and when you look at the damage from the photographs around Hammer, you know, you can see the intensity of the action and why it's important that damage basically can really affect tank battles. We've also, you know, with the battle won, I suppose, by the Germans, they'd be able to refit and recover a lot of their vehicles, and that is critical in a battle like this, because you can get a lot of those damaged, knocked out tanks back into action, resupplied, refueled, and keep that inertia going. But there were other casualties, and you can see the Germans lost a couple of platoons, but the French, they lost loads, and Gamelin and Gort are in real trouble, especially when we find out that the French staff basically down at Vincennes don't even have radios and telephones. It's a disaster. Robin's building lots of smoke markers, good old Nipper, and we've asked Craig for more French tanks, who's such a good old egg, and do support him and help him out, because he loves what he's doing. He's a great wargamer. Also a big shout out to Cranston Fine Arts. They do brilliant work, and I do suggest you treat yourself and buy yourself a picture. So it's been really damn hot in that Wolf's Lair as we've been doing these battles, and I suppose one could say it's no time for fun and games, especially when Jerry's coming rampant. But ultimately we've got a lot more coming up, including we're going to look at some of the platoon action and how they operate in ACHTUNG Panzer Squad Leader. Moreover, we're going to have more parachute operations. So this was a 4-parter, the Battle of Hannut, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And let's never forget the sacrifice of all those tankers and infantry. And a big thanks also to our lady supporters. So this is, guys, Blitzkrieg. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe, stay lucky, and stay tuned. It's bye for now.